Hey, everybody, thank you for tuning in today. I'm Pastor Hans, and whether you are with our partners at Westmo or you're watching online, maybe on your couch sipping your coffee, we are so glad you're with us. Hey, today we are in the last week of a worship series we have called Stop Going to Church. We've spent the last several weeks talking about what does it mean to be the church. You see, the church was never meant to be a building. The church was never meant to be sort of a social club. It wasn't meant to be a sort of event you go to once a week. No, the church was always meant to be something totally different. So a couple of weeks ago, here's what we did. We went back and we looked at the original word for church. The original word was ekklesia, which means the called out. As the church, we are people who are called out of the everyday ordinary for a unique mission. How many of you remember these guys? The Blues Brothers, Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi. And what did Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi say in those movies? They said this: we're on a mission from who? We're on a mission from God. You see, that's how it is to be the church. We, as people who call ourselves Christians, we are people who are on a mission from God. We're called out for a mission. And that mission is this: we are people called to lead all people to a lifelong faith in Jesus Christ. That's what it means to be the church. In the end, that's what it's all about, that we are people whose lives have been so transformed by our faith in Jesus Christ, that we are going to be people who gather together to lead other people to a lifelong faith, to lead others to reach out beyond our doors so that others may experience what we experience. Now, I want to talk about this today as we wrap up this series, because there's actually a problem that we Christians face. And the problem looks like this. There was a study done of our denomination, and the folks who did that study, they asked people within our denomination, how many people on average do you invite to church? How often do you reach out to that neighbor, that relative, and invite them to church? Do you know what the answer to that question was? On average, Christians of our denomination, they invite 2 people to church. Not 2 people each Sunday, not 2 people each week or each month or each year. People of our Christian flavor invite people to church, 2 people, just 2 people in their entire lifetime. I don't know about you, but I think we can do better. There's a problem there. And so here's what we're going to talk about today as we wrap up this series. I can't wait for the conversation. We're going to ask this question: how do I lead other people to a lifelong faith in Jesus? How do I invite others to experience the faith that I love so much? And to set the stage for this, I want to tell you about a story that's in the book of Mark. In Mark chapter 2, we hear about this guy named Levi, who Jesus looks at and says, I want you to follow me. I want you to be one of my disciples. Now, to everyone who watched Jesus do this, their mouths would have dropped, because calling Levi to be one of his disciples would have been shocking, even appalling to some religious types. Because here's the thing about Levi. Levi was scummy. He was a tax collector, and tax collectors, they were sort of white-collar criminals, if you will. They were charged with collecting taxes, but they would collect more than their fair share to fill their own pockets. They hung out with seedy characters. They hung out with people that others saw as filthy, and so they were seen as not only filthy humans, but religiously unclean. Jesus invites Levi, I want you to follow me. I want you to be one of my disciples. Now, when Jesus invites him, Levi does what maybe we would do if we were invited to be one of Jesus's disciples. He throws this huge party. And who do you invite to your party? You invite all your close friends, your close family. And remember, Levi was this seedy character, and so all his friends, all his family, all the people he cared about, they were just as seedy. They were just as scummy. They weren't the type of people that your mother told you to hang out with, if you know what I mean, in high school. And Jesus was there too. And so the Pharisees, the church muckety-mucks, they looked at the disciples and they said, why does your teacher, why does this Jesus, why does he eat and drink with sinners? And I tell this story because I think this is important. Jesus' response looks something like this. On hearing this, Jesus said to them, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Think about that for a minute. Jesus says, I didn't come for the people who have their lives all together. I didn't come for the people whose lives fit in nice, neat boxes. I came for those who are sick. I came for those who are in need of a doctor. I came for sinners. A couple of weeks ago, we held an event at a brewery. Yes, your church held an event at a brewery. Our band played, and let me tell you, the place was packed. It was packed. And I got to tell you that the brewery was a little nervous about having us there. Because I think that brewery, they thought, these religious people, they're going to be a little fuddy-duddy, we know, kind of uptight. But we convinced them, we want to be there because we want to show people a different side of what it means to be the church. The place was packed. People had a ton of fun. In fact, one of the bartenders sent me a text message the next morning. It said this, last night was so much fun. I hope it can happen again. So wonderful to see you and chat. It really meant a lot. That's the church showing up in a place the church doesn't normally show up. Well, I got to tell you, since then, I've had a few people who have come up to me and they've said, what in the world is our church doing at the bar? There's alcohol there. There's people who aren't really our type there. It's not proper that we would be there. And I explained to them that here at Calvary, we see things a little differently. We see things a little differently. It's actually those people that we are called to reach. In fact, Jesus came into this world not to reach those whose lives are nice and neat, but to reach the sinners, it says. Here's what I think about church. Most churches are designed for the people who are already there. Have you ever thought of that? I mean, think about it. Most of us don't even realize it. We come to church, we sit in these hard pews. I mean, they're the most uncomfortable furniture on the planet. And then we are asked to open these hymnals. Where else do you have a thing called a hymnal? And then we sing songs that are hundreds of years old. We do this kind of call and response thing. Some strange guy gets up in a white robe. We play the pipe. I mean, think about what church is like. It's built for people who know what's going on, people who are already there. I don't know if you're like me, but as a kid, I went to church growing up. But here's the thing, the church never reached me. And maybe the same is true for you. I know it's true for a whole lot of people in our world today. Take a look at this graph. This graph shows church membership amongst U.S. adults over the last, since 1940. And you can see for the longest time here, up until about the year 2000, about 70% of Americans were members of churches. But look what's happened since the year 2000. It's just plummeted. Today, less than 50% of Americans are members of churches. Now, if you're of our flavor of Christianity, a Lutheran, you might go, yeah, that's everybody else, but not us Lutherans. Sorry, folks, we're below average. Here's what it looks like for the Lutheran Church. Our weekly worship attendance by the year 2041 is expected to decline by 98%. Let me say that again, 98%. I don't know about you, but here's what I think. We can do better, can't we? So our question for today is this: how do I be that person who's leading other people to a lifelong faith? To answer that question, we're going to take a look at another story in Mark chapter 2. The story goes like this. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, Capernaum was Jesus' hometown. That's where he lived. The people heard that he had come home. He was coming home, and so you better believe everyone went, okay, we got to get together with Jesus. We want to hear him teach. We want to hear him preach. We are going to be there wherever it is. It goes on, it says, they gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. He was in this little house. It was packed to the gills. I imagine people were on their knees in front. People were looking in windows. They were out in the street listening as carefully as they can. But then something happened. Listen to this. Some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man. We don't know how he became paralyzed. He might have been paralyzed all his life. He might have just had an accident. We don't know. But it says they brought their friend, and this friend was carried by 4 of his buddies. They carried him to Jesus. They must have believed that Jesus could do something. Well, the story goes on. It says, since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it. And then they lowered the mat the man was lying on. It goes on and says this. It says, when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, son, your sins are forgiven. Here's what I love about that story. Those men were willing to do whatever it took so that their friends could experience Jesus. So back to our question. The question is this: how do I lead people to a lifelong faith? Here's what I want to suggest. The first thing we might consider is this: we've got to carry some burdens. Did you notice in the story? They didn't just sort of point the man to where Jesus would be. Jesus is going to be at the Johnson house at 6 o'clock. You might want to take an Uber there. No, here's what the passage says. It said, some men came bringing to him a paralyzed man. They carried this man. These 4 friends carried him to Jesus. We don't know how far it was. Was it 2 miles, 3 miles? Did this man fall in an accident out in the country and it was 5, 10 miles? It's interesting. As Christian people, I think many of us, when it comes to us inviting people to a lifelong faith, inviting people to church, many of us are sort of what I'd call drive-by inviters. We might say to that new neighbor, hey, if you don't have a church, you should come to ours. Or maybe there's a coworker who's going through a tough time. We say, hey, you might want to go to church, right? And then we've got some crazy relatives. Maybe you have one of these who says to you, if you don't go to church, you're going to hell, right? We're sort of drive-by inviters. Here's what I love about our church. We think about this a little bit different. At our church, we don't just invite people, we actually bring them. I mean, think about it. That's what those 4 men did. They carried their buddy all the way to Jesus because they couldn't not bring him there. I know some of you are thinking, well, I don't know enough to invite anybody to church. I'm not smart enough. I'm not religious enough. Well, you've heard the saying before. This is true. People don't care about how much you know. They first want to know how much you care. Those 4 friends, they cared for their buddy. They carried him all the way to Jesus. On Tuesday of this week, we gathered a group of people here at our church. You may know, if you're from the Alexandria community, that we had some huge storms that rolled through our community this past summer. In the town of Ferreda alone, they lost 150 homes that were either destroyed or they were damaged, and they've displaced that entire community. And so we got together with the people from West Central Community Action. We got together with emergency management, and we said, what can we do for these families? And so we brought them all together here at the church. We packed the church. We served them burgers and brats, and we created a space for them to simply be together. And man, there were tears. People were hugging one another, neighbors they hadn't seen in months. We offered them opportunity to get some help. In fact, we put on each table a little card where they could write down anything they needed. And we as a church promised that we would do whatever we could to help them. In fact, there was a guy there, a man who had lost his home. He lived with his brother. They were living on the couch of some friends. And the guy came to me and he said, "Hey, would you help me fill this out?" I said, "Sure." He said, "I don't know how to write. I don't know how to spell. I can't imagine what it's like navigating insurance, navigating everything they've navigated over the last several months." You see, here's the thing. Most of those families, they said to me, they said, "Hey, everybody else's lives have gone on, but we feel forgotten." Church, here's what we know. We as a church, we don't forget. We don't forget because we're the people in this community who carry other people's burdens. I met with a young woman from our community. Her name is Dasha. Last school year, she came to our community as a foreign exchange student from Ukraine. In February of last year, she got a phone call from her mom. Her mom was in tears, and her mom said, "The bombing has started. Dasha, you can't come home." So we're working with Dasha to carry her burden, to try and figure out how she makes a life for herself here in Alexandria. And you're going to be able to support her as well. That's what we do, church. We don't forget. We carry other people's burdens. When everybody else is annoyed by hearing about the war on TV, we're tired of it. We never get tired of carrying other people's burdens. How do we lead others to a lifelong faith? Well, first and foremost, we carry some burdens. But secondly, here's what we do. We also break some rules. Any other rule breakers out there? I know it's hard for some of you to believe, but I wasn't very good with rules as a kid. I mean, that whole rule about waiting 30 minutes after you eat to go swimming, never did that. My parents had a rule, make your bed before you go to school, wasn't very good at that. They also had a rule, don't aim the Nerf gun at your sister's head. Yeah, a lot of stories there, wasn't good at that either. You see, in order to lead other people to a lifelong faith, sometimes we got to break a few rules. And that's what those four men did. Remember the story? It goes like this. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof. Talk about breaking some rules. They crawled up on the roof and they dug through the roof. It says they went to the roof above Jesus and they dug through it. And then they lowered the mat the man was on. It's interesting. I did a little research on what roofs would have been made out of. They would have had timbers about every 2-3 feet, and then they had thatch, and then there was mud that was packed in there. And actually, one of the main components of a roof would have been manure, people. And that manure and the dirt, they would have combined to create some grass. People used to lay up on roofs of houses and take naps in the afternoon. Here's what's interesting. As I think about those stories, those men digging through manure, here's the truth about leading other people to faith. Sometimes you need to dig through a little, in order to get people to church. I mean, you know this, you and I, we've got friends, we've got family members who have a whole lot of church baggage. They've been hurt by the church. They've been hurt by people who call themselves religious on Sunday morning, but say the worst things during the week. You see, as people of faith, sometimes we've got to dig through the manure in order to get people to church. What I love about this story is they were willing to do whatever it took for their friend to experience Jesus. Pastor and author Craig Groeschel, he says this about his church: "We will do anything short of sin to reach people who don't know Jesus." The way we talk about it here at Calvary is we say this: in order to reach people no one else is reaching, we're going to do things that no one else is doing. Nothing is going to get in the way of us leading people to Jesus. A couple of Christmases ago, there was a young man who brought this older man to us. It was his dad. And this young man, he looked at us and said, "This is my dad. I brought him to church. This is the first Christmas he's ever been in church." And that's when the man said to us, "I've never been to church." You see, the fact that he had never been to church, we're not going to let that get in the way of us leading him to a lifelong faith in Jesus. There was a young woman in our church. She was babysitting one night, and she had to tell me this story. She said that it was time for bed, and she got this little girl she was babysitting into bed, all tucked in. And as they were sitting there, this girl said, "Do you want to do your bedtime prayers now?" And that little girl looked at her babysitter with this sort of curious look on her face. She obviously wasn't used to praying. And so this babysitter, she mustered up some courage and looked at this little girl and said, "Would you like to pray?" And the girl said, "I don't ever pray. Our family doesn't do that. But if you'd teach me, I'd love to learn how." You see, we don't let anything get in the way. You see, in order to reach people no one else is reaching, we're going to do things that no one else is doing. People have come to me on a regular basis since COVID has sort of passed for the large part. And they say to me, all this stuff we're doing online, it was great during COVID, but it's not real church. When are we going to just quit doing all that and move on? And I want to tell people, you know what? This online business that we do as a church, it's our front door. I mean, if our online worship service was a service in person, it would be the largest service of the week. You see, to reach people no one else is reaching, we're going to do things that no one else is doing. Friends, how do we lead people to a lifelong faith? Well, we do this. We carry their burdens. Like those 4 men, we're going to carry, but we're going to say, you know what? Everyone else has forgotten about you, but we will refuse to forget. You see, we're going to carry your burdens. But secondly, every once in a while, we're going to have to break some rules. We're going to do whatever it takes that other people might experience the love of Jesus. A love that people like you and I, that we know pretty darn well, don't we? I mean, let's be honest, you and I, we know the love of this God because we have a God who, well, he carried some burdens for us, didn't he? And this God also, this God and Jesus broke almost every rule there was for people like you and people like me. So how about it? How about it? Let's stop going to church. Let's stop going to church and let's be the church.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with my heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Holy, there is no one like you. There is no beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around
Holy, there is no one like you, God. Thank you so much for joining us for worship today, for praising the Most High God. Please join us in praying the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to worship today. We're just honored that you're with us. And if this is your first time with us, here's what we want to say. We're just so grateful. We'd love for you to head out to our website, calvaryalec.org, and we'd love for you to take a next step with us. There's a little button there that says sign up for emails. If you click that, we'll send you out a note once a week. It's an easy way to find out all about all the things that are going on here at Calvary and ways that you can grow and engage in the life of faith with us. We'd love for you to join us. Hey, a couple of things going on in the life of our church. First off, Halloween is coming. Anybody like Halloween? I love Halloween. I especially love candy. And so we are going to have a special Halloween event here at the church. We call it Trunk or Treat. There are 3 ways you can get involved. Between now and Halloween, you can bring bags of candy. We got to collect like a bajillion bags of candy to hand out that night. And so we need your candy donations. You can drop them off here at the church. Second way you can get involved is to sign up to bring your vehicle and decorate it, decorate your trunk, and help us pass out candy to the thousands of kids that will come through our parking lot. And last but certainly not least, if you've got a son or daughter or granddaughter or neighbor kids, bring them, plan to bring them here to the church on Halloween. Hey, one other thing I want to talk to you about today. We are in the midst of wrapping up a giving appeal. Here at Calvary, every fall, we challenge the people who call Calvary their church home to make a plan for how they plan to support our church in the coming year. You see, when it comes to generosity at Calvary, it's just what we do. And so I want to invite you, if you consider Calvary your church home, to use the QR code, follow the link, and head out to our website and sign up for automated giving. It's the best way for you to live out the generous life that God calls people like you and me to. Folks, thanks again for tuning in today. As we always do, we're going to close our time together with our offering. You can make your offering in one of the ways on the screen. The first way is, again, simply go out to our website and hit the button that says give. There you can make that gift. Or you can use the app on your phone, Venmo, and you can see our handle on the screen. If maybe you aren't used to using technology in that way, maybe you write a check and drop it in the mail to the address on the screen. Last but certainly not least, if you're just not sure how to make your gift, or you want to talk about making a commitment in the coming year, just give us a call in the church office. We'd love to talk to you. Folks, thanks for tuning in. See you next week.